The morning sun cast long shadows across the military training ground as Alina Volkov stepped off the transport truck. Her boots hit the dusty earth with a soft thud, and she could already feel dozens of eyes turning toward her. The air smelled of gun oil and sweat, mixed with the sharp scent of pine trees surrounding the base. She adjusted the strap of her rifle bag on her shoulder and walked forward with her chin held high. Even though her heart was pounding like a drum inside her chest, Alina was 23 years old. With sharp green eyes and dark hair pulled back in a tight bun, she had grown up in a small village in the mountains, where her father had taught her to hunt from the age of 7. While other girls her age played with dolls, Alina was learning to track deer through snow and calculate wind speed with just a wet finger held to the breeze. Her father always told her that patience and precision were more important than strength. And she had taken those words to heart, but this was different. This was the National Defense Academy's elite sniper training program, and she was the first woman ever selected to attend. The selection process had been brutal. Out of 3,000 applicants, only 50 had been chosen, and Alina was the only female among them. She had scored in the top 10 during the preliminary tests, hitting targets at distances that made even the veteran instructors raise their eyebrows. Still, she knew that her real test was just beginning. As she approached the main assembly area, the whispers started. They were not quiet whispers either. The male recruits made no effort to hide their opinions. Some laughed openly, others shook their heads in disbelief. One tall soldier with a scarred face nudged his companion and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Look at that. They're letting women play soldier now. What's next? Are they going to give us teddy bears instead of rifles?" His friends erupted in laughter, and Alina felt her face grow hot, but she kept walking. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her react. The training camp was located deep in the wilderness, far from any city. Wooden barracks lined one side of the compound, while the shooting ranges and obstacle courses stretched across the valley on the other side. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still covered with snow, even though it was late spring. Alina was assigned to Barrack 7, and when she entered, the conversation inside died immediately. 12 men stared at her, as if she had just fallen from the sky. Nobody said a word. She found her assigned bunk, placed her bag on it, and began unpacking her gear. The silence was so thick you could cut it with a knife. That evening, during the first assembly, Commander Petrov addressed all the recruits. He was a mountain of a man with a voice like rolling thunder and a chest full of medals from past wars. He explained that the training would last 8 weeks, and only those who could endure would earn the title of certified sniper. He spoke about discipline, sacrifice, and honor. Then his eyes swept across the formation and landed on Alina. For a moment, the entire group seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what he would say. Commander Petrov said nothing about Alina being a woman. He simply continued his speech, as if she were no different from any other recruit. Alina felt a small wave of relief wash over her, but it was short-lived. After the assembly, as the recruits dispersed toward their barracks, she overheard a group of soldiers talking near the equipment shed. One of them, a stocky man with red hair named Dmitri, was speaking in a mocking tone that carried clearly through the evening air. "I give her 3 days before she quits," Dmitri said with a cruel smile. "Women don't belong in combat. They belong in kitchens and hospitals. This is just some political stunt to make the government look progressive. You watch. She'll cry herself to sleep tonight and be gone by morning." The men around him nodded in agreement, and several laughed. Alina stood in the shadows, her fists clenched so tight her knuckles turned white. She wanted to march over there and tell them exactly what she thought, but she forced herself to walk away. Actions would speak louder than words. She would prove them wrong on the range, not with arguments. The first week of training was designed to break the week. Every morning began at 4:30 with a 10-kilometer run through the mountains, carrying full packs weighing 20 kilograms. Then came hours of physical conditioning, rope climbing, combat drills, and weapons maintenance. The instructors showed no mercy. They shouted, criticized, and pushed every recruit to their absolute limit. By the third day, 5 men had already quit, unable to handle the pressure. Alina was exhausted, her muscles screaming in pain, but she refused to show weakness. Every time, she felt like giving up. She remembered the mocking voices and pushed herself harder. What made things worse was the constant sabotage. Small things at first. Her rifle went missing from the armory. She had to spend an hour searching for it while the instructors yelled at her for being late to formation. Someone put salt in her water canteen, making her sick during a long march. Her boots disappeared one night. She had to run the morning exercise in her backup pair, which gave her terrible blisters. She knew exactly who was behind it. Dmitri and his friends made no secret of their dislike for her. They wanted her to fail, to prove their point that women did not belong here. But Alina adapted. She started sleeping with her boots under her pillow. She checked her equipment 3 times before every exercise. She ate separately from the others, avoiding any chance for someone to tamper with her food. The isolation was painful, but she told herself it was temporary. She focused on the only thing that mattered, becoming the best sniper in this training class. During shooting practice, she consistently outperformed half the men, hitting targets with a precision that even the instructors acknowledged with grudging nods. Her groupings were tight, her breathing control was excellent, her patience was extraordinary. By the end of the second week, something began to shift. A few of the recruits started treating her differently. Not friendly exactly, but with a hint of respect. One soldier named Victor, who had been neutral from the start, actually spoke to her during a break. He asked her where she learned to shoot. And when she told him about growing up hunting in the mountains, he nodded thoughtfully. "That explains it," he said. "You have the patience of someone who's tracked real prey. Most of these guys just learned at shooting galleries." It was a small moment, but it meant more to Alina than he could possibly know. The 4th week brought a new challenge that separated the capable from the exceptional. The instructors introduced advanced long-range shooting, where targets were placed at distances of 800 to 1,000 meters. At these distances, everything mattered. The curve of the Earth, the rotation of the planet, humidity, temperature, wind speed at multiple elevations, and even the beating of your own heart could throw off a shot. The margin for error was almost zero. Many recruits who had performed well at shorter ranges suddenly found themselves struggling. Their shots went wide, hitting dirt or missing targets completely. Alina thrived. She had a natural gift for reading the environment. While others relied heavily on calculators and charts, she could feel the wind on her skin and instinctively know how to adjust. Her father had taught her to become one with nature, to observe everything without overthinking. She watched the grass sway, studied the heat shimmer rising from the ground, and listened to the way the wind whistled through the valley. Then she would make her adjustments and take her shot. More often than not, the bullet found its mark. Dmitri hated this. His own performance had been declining, and the more Alina succeeded, the angrier he became. One afternoon, after she scored a perfect 5 out of 5 hits on distant targets while he only managed 2, he exploded. "She's getting special treatment," he shouted at Instructor Kozlov, loud enough for everyone on the range to hear. "There's no way a woman can shoot like that naturally. Someone's helping her, or the targets are being moved closer when it's her turn. This whole thing is rigged." His face was red with rage. Spit flew from his mouth as he spoke. Instructor Kozlov was a patient man, but his patience had limits. He walked slowly toward Dmitri, his boots crunching on the gravel, and stopped just inches from the recruit's face. When he spoke, his voice was cold as winter ice. "Are you questioning my integrity, soldier?" Dmitri's anger faltered, and he took a step back, suddenly aware that he had crossed a line. "I know, sir, but—" Kozlov cut him off. "Volkov's targets are the same distance as yours. Her rifle is standard issue, just like yours. If you have a problem with her performance, then improve your own instead of making excuses. Drop and give me 100 push-ups. Now." As Dmitri dropped to the ground and began his punishment, Alina felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of her was satisfied to see him humiliated, but another part felt no joy in it. She had not come here to make enemies. She had come to prove herself, to honor her father's memory, and to serve her country. But she was beginning to understand that some people would never accept her, no matter how well she performed. Their hatred was not about her skills. It was about their own insecurities and prejudices. All she could do was continue moving forward and let her results speak for themselves. That night, Victor approached her again during dinner. He sat down at her table without asking, something that made several other recruits glance over in surprise. "You made an enemy today," he said quietly, nodding toward where Dmitri sat with his group, shooting dark looks in their direction. Alina shrugged. "I made an enemy the day I arrived." Victor smiled slightly. "True, but now he's desperate. Desperate people do stupid things. Watch your back." Alina appreciated the warning. Victor seemed like one of the few genuine people here. "Why are you being nice to me?" she asked directly. Victor thought for a moment. "Because you're a better shot than most of us, and that's the only thing that should matter here." Week 6 arrived with news that sent waves of nervous energy through the entire camp. General Mikhail Volkov, no relation to Alina, despite sharing the same last name, would be visiting to observe the training program. He was a legend in the military, a decorated war hero who had served in 3 major conflicts and personally trained some of the finest snipers in the nation's history. More importantly, he was known for his traditional views. He had publicly stated in interviews that he believed combat roles should remain exclusively male, arguing that women lacked the physical and mental strength required for frontline duty. When Alina heard the news, her stomach dropped. Of all the generals who could have visited, it had to be him. She knew that his presence would turn her performance into a spectacle. If she failed in front of General Volkov, it would be used as evidence that women did not belong in sniper training. If she succeeded, her critics would find ways to dismiss it as luck or claim the test was made easier for her. There was no winning scenario. She had no choice except to do her absolute best. The camp went into overdrive, preparing for the general's arrival. Barracks were cleaned until they sparkled, uniforms were pressed perfectly, and every piece of equipment was inspected and polished. Commander Petrov gathered all the recruits and made it clear that this visit was crucial. The general would observe their training exercises and select the top performers for a special demonstration. This demonstration would determine who received advanced placement in the program, and who would be assigned to standard positions after graduation. Everything they had worked for over the past 6 weeks would be judged in a single afternoon. On the morning of the general's arrival, the sky was perfectly clear, with just a slight breeze coming down from the mountains. Alina woke up extra early, checked her rifle 3 times, and went through her mental preparation routine. She visualized perfect shots, controlled breathing, and calm focus. She could not afford to let the pressure get to her. As she walked toward the assembly area, she noticed Dmitri and his friends whispering and laughing while looking in her direction. Something about their expressions made her uneasy, but she pushed the feeling aside. General Volkov arrived in a convoy of military vehicles precisely at 9 in the morning. He stepped out wearing a uniform covered in ribbons and medals, silver hair cut short in military fashion, his posture straight as a rifle barrel. He looked exactly like the photos Alina had seen, stern face, hard eyes, and an expression that suggested he had little patience for nonsense. Commander Petrov greeted him formally, and the general inspected the assembled recruits with the critical eye of someone who had seen thousands of soldiers and could spot weakness instantly. His gaze paused on Alina. For a long moment, he simply stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to Commander Petrov and said something too quiet for anyone else to hear. Petrov nodded and called out several names, including Alina's. They were the ones selected for the demonstration. 10 recruits total. As they stepped forward, Alina noticed that Dmitri was not among them. His face turned purple with rage, but he remained silent. The demonstration would take place at the advanced range, where targets had been set up at various distances, some as far as 1,200 meters. This was going to be the most difficult shooting of their lives. The 10 selected recruits were led to the advanced shooting range where General Volkov and his staff had taken positions in an observation area. The general sat in a raised platform with a perfect view of both the shooters and the distant targets through high-powered spotting scopes. The atmosphere was tense. Every recruit knew their entire future could be determined by their performance in the next few hours. Alina took her position and began setting up her rifle, checking every adjustment with careful precision. Before the shooting began, General Volkov stood up and addressed them. His voice was deep and carried authority that made everyone stand a little straighter. "I have trained snipers for 30 years, he said. "I have seen the best and the worst. Today, you will each take 3 shots at targets of increasing difficulty. Your performance here will determine your final rankings in this program. I do not grade on potential or effort. I grade on results. A sniper who misses their target is not just useless, they are dangerous to everyone around them. If you cannot handle the pressure, you should not be here." His eyes moved deliberately to Alina when he said that last sentence. The message was clear. He did not believe she belonged here, and he expected her to fail. Alina felt anger rise in her chest, but she channeled it into focus. She would not let his prejudice affect her performance. The shooting order was determined by current rankings, which meant Alina would go 7th out of the 10. She watched carefully as the first recruit took his position. The first target was set at 800 meters, a standard military silhouette. The recruit adjusted his scope, controlled his breathing, and fired. The shot rang out across the valley. A hit center mass. Solid performance. The second and third recruits also hit their targets, though not as cleanly. The fourth missed entirely, his shot going wide due to overcorrection for wind. The fifth and sixth both hit, bringing the running average to a respectable level. Then it was Elena's turn. She moved to the firing position, her movements smooth and practiced. She could feel every eye on her, especially the general's cold stare. She settled into position, the rifle but pressed firmly against her shoulder, her cheek resting against the stock. Through the scope, she could see the distant target wavering slightly in the heat shimmer. She took a breath, let half of it out, and felt her heart beat slow. The wind was coming from her right at approximately 7 kilometers per hour, slightly stronger at mid-range based on how the grass moved in the valley. She made her adjustments instinctively, muscle memory from years of hunting guiding her hands. Then, in the space between heartbeats, she squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder, and the sharp crack echoed off the mountains. Through the scope, she saw the impact. Dead center. A perfect hit. There was a moment of silence. Then Instructor Kozlov called out center mass. Perfect score. She heard a few recruits behind her clap quietly before stopping themselves. General Volkov said nothing. He simply wrote something in his notebook and gestured for the next shooter to proceed. The remaining 3 recruits performed adequately, with 2 hits and 1 miss. Then came the second round, with targets at 1,000 meters. This distance was significantly more challenging, requiring precise calculations and perfect execution. Alina watched as recruit after recruit stepped up. The results were mixed. 3 hits, 4 misses, and 2 that clipped the edge of the target for partial credit. When Elena's turn came, she went through the same ritual. Breathe, observe, calculate, execute. Her shot rang true again, striking the target just slightly right of center. Still, a solid hit. The general wrote in his notebook again, his expression unchanged. Then came the final round, and everything changed. General Volkov stood up and announced that instead of the planned target, he was implementing a special test. At 1,200 meters, the instructors had placed a thin wooden post, no thicker than a man's wrist, with a playing card attached to its top. A single playing card, the Queen of Hearts. The challenge was not just to hit the target, but to split it cleanly down the middle. In 30 years of training snipers, the general explained, only 4 people had ever accomplished this feat. He did not believe any of the current recruits could do it, but he wanted to see how they handled an impossible task. The recruits looked at each other with a mixture of disbelief and dread. Hitting a playing card at 1,200 meters was nearly impossible under perfect conditions. Splitting it cleanly was the stuff of legends. The first recruit took his shot. Complete miss. The bullet kicked up dust 10 meters behind the target. The second recruit fired. Closer, but still a miss. The third recruit's shot actually hit the wooden post about halfway down, which was impressive given the distance, but nowhere near the card. The fourth and fifth recruits both missed entirely. The sixth recruit came the closest, his bullet passing just above the card and snapping the very top of the wooden post. General Volkov nodded slightly at that one. At least it showed decent calculation. Alina was next. She approached the firing line, feeling the weight of every assumption. Every dismissive comment, every mocking laugh that had followed her since the day she arrived. This was her moment. Not just for herself, but for every woman who had been told she was not strong enough, not tough enough, not good enough, for something she desperately wanted to do. She settled into position and looked through her scope. The playing card was barely visible at this distance, a tiny red and white rectangle fluttering slightly in the breeze. The wind had picked up since the previous round, making calculations more complex. She could feel it shifting, gusting slightly, then calming, then gusting again. Most snipers would rush the shot, afraid of the wind changing mid-flight. But Elena's father had taught her patience above all else. She waited. She watched the grass, the trees, the way the heat shimmered. She felt the rhythm of the wind, recognizing the pattern. There was a brief moment every 30 seconds or so where it calmed almost completely. She would have to time her shot perfectly. She controlled her breathing, slowing her heart rate, entering that meditative state where everything else disappeared. The world narrowed to just her, the rifle, and the distant target. Time seemed to stretch. She felt the next calm period approaching, counted down in her head, and as the wind dropped, she squeezed the trigger with perfect smoothness. The shot felt right the moment it left the barrel. She kept her eye pressed to the scope and watched the bullet's path. 1,200 meters away, the playing card seemed to jump, then flutter down in two pieces. She had split it perfectly down the center. For a moment there was complete silence on the range. Then Instructor Kozlov's voice broke through, slightly awed. Direct hit. Card split clean through the middle, a murmur went through the observers, and several recruits behind Alina started clapping, then cheering. Even some of Dmitri's friends joined in. Caught up in the impossibility of what they had just witnessed, Alina stood up and turned toward the observation platform. General Volkov was standing, his notebook forgotten in his hand, staring at her with an expression she could not quite read. Then slowly, deliberately, he began walking down from the platform toward her. The entire range went quiet again. Alina stood at attention as the general approached, her heart pounding. He stopped in front of her, his hard eyes studying her face. Then, to everyone's absolute shock, he extended his hand. "In 30 years, I have never seen a shot like that," he said, his voice carrying across the silent range. "You have proven me wrong, Recruit Volkov. I came here believing women had no place in combat. You have shown me that skill and dedication know no gender. You have earned your place here and my respect." Alina shook his hand, barely trusting herself to speak. "Thank you, sir," she managed. The general turned to address everyone present. "Let this be a lesson to all of you. Never underestimate someone based on your assumptions. This woman is a better sniper than most of you will ever be. Learn from her." He looked back at Alina one more time and added quietly, so only she could hear, "Your father would be very proud." Alina's eyes stung with sudden tears, but she blinked them back. She had done it. Not just passed the test, but shattered every doubt and obstacle in her path. As the general walked away, and the other recruits gathered around to congratulate her, Alina finally allowed herself a small smile. She had proven that she belonged here, and no one could ever take that away from her.